Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? So we're going to get going. So if you can all make sure you've signed in, and if you can grab an agenda, we'll get started in filling you in with what's been going on in the last year with the comprehensive plan. And before I get going here, tonight we have our consultant, who is Brian Wright, and Brian is with TPUDC out of Franklin, Tennessee, and they have been working with us for almost a year and a half now, from the time we started kicking off our first meeting. I know some of you were at the first meeting in October of 16, and he's back again, and the idea for tonight's presentation is Brian will introduce you to where we're at with the public draft, and then we will have some questions and answers, and then we'll give you an opportunity to provide some comments. On the walls around town, the council chambers, you'll see these posters, and these are pages from the draft comprehensive plan. So you'll have a chance to be able to read some of the ideas and then tell us if you agree or not agree. And I'll let Brian explain the process, because this is his process. But before I get going, I did want to introduce a couple of folks here in the room. We've got the mayor, Marky Butler, is here. And we've got Tom Fridstein from our planning commission is here as well. And I think those are our decision makers in the room so far. So I would like to, I am Julianne Woods. I'm the Community Development Director. So I've been working on this project with Brian and my staff and other town staff on this project. So if you have any questions after the fact or whatever, feel free to contact me or send me an email or what have you. And I'll get back to you on whatever it is. So with that, Brian, you ready?
Sure.
You can take the coat off. It's not that cold today.
The heater wasn't on when we got here. So. Yeah, right. So, I've come here from Nashville, so it's cold in here to me. Actually, for the past couple of weeks, we had single-digit temperatures, and kids were out for 5 days for snow days with our 3 inches of snow. Anyway, it's always amazing to come back here. It's so beautiful, and such a day like today especially. So as Julian said, I'm Brian Wright. I'm principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, and we are the leaders of your comprehensive plan team. I am, at this point, I've become just a spokesperson for the plan, because we have an amazing team behind me that's created all of this. We had transportation engineers, we had economists, we had artists, we had planners and urban designers and people who are expert on infrastructure and all sorts of things. And so we've been working on this so long. I hope you don't have any very technical and specific questions for me, because when we wrote this long ago. But I know what's going on. So what I want to do tonight is go through a presentation just to get you up to speed on the draft. It's been out available for download for a couple of weeks now. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but I'm going to assume that you haven't in this presentation. But I'm going to stay at high level. There is one portion of the presentation that'll get kind of boring, because I'm going to be reading off slides, which I hate doing, but otherwise I'll never remember all the points otherwise. And then we'll get to the most important part, is question and answer. So I'll just stand here and we'll chat. And then when we're done with that, if you guys will, anybody who wants to, take the time just to roam around. And as Julian said, these are pages from the plan that have kind of the action items and things to do. So we have dots on the table over there for red and green. Red are like, if I don't agree with this idea, I don't like it, you put a red dot next to it. Green if you do like it. There's pins, so all at the bottom here it says your comments, so you can just write. And so we really want this to be just a free-form way to get very direct and tangible comments from you guys. Obviously we're taking comments still on the web tool and all of that, so if you need to go home and really think about it more, or you don't feel like reading all of this stuff, but some people love just touching pen and paper and writing on the walls. So just don't push too hard because these walls are really cool and expensive. So I don't want to write on them. All right, so I'll run you guys through. So I'm pointing at this thing, even though you guys are all looking there. So if you'll follow me over here, can you all see over here? Okay. So all the way to the very beginning, assuming that you may not even know what a comprehensive plan is. So a comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document. It really establishes the vision for the future of the town. It's providing guidance for growth and development, and it has specific action items to help achieve that vision in the future. And so that's kind of what the point of the comprehensive plan is. And then the comprehensive plan has sort of things that flow from it. So for instance, your zoning has to be in keeping with your comprehensive plan, and all sorts of other things kind of refer back to that. When you're making decisions about should we allow this development to occur or not, or somebody wants to make exceptions from what the existing zoning is, and you're looking at that, the comp plan is really where you go for the guidance to say, is this concept in keeping with the comprehensive plan? The idea is that, I just jumped ahead of myself. So you guys have all these other documents like the poster plan and the annual budget, capital improvements plan, those sorts of things. Also state and regional initiatives go into that. And then you have, council, planning commission, town staff, and then the plan, is really the heart of all of these things. And so that's what we kind of have it in the middle. How many of you guys have participated so far in a public portion of this, or we've had meetings and things? Okay, that's great. So most people. It's been quite a robust process so far. We had the project kickoff back in October of 2016. I can't believe it's been that long ago. We had our visioning sessions in January of 17. We had people out on the mall because we knew that it's hard to get people to come off the slope, so we tried to catch people as they were on their way. It was really cold that day, and it was really hard to get people's attention, but we tried hard. So that was me and Travis out there, and we wanted to try to do things that you guys related to and were fun. So we had people climbing the walls, talking about planning. So one of the things that we did was we had everybody that participated in the Plan-A-Palooza process, envisioning, put dots on the map as to where they thought the areas of focus need to be as we go through the process. A few areas stood out when we put all the dots together: the mall, Snowmass Center, rodeo grounds, and the Owl Creek, Anderson Ranch intersection area there. And so a lot of the attention for the comprehensively planned areas was focused on those as we went through the process. And so here you can see, we actually even had people drawing their ideas and putting buildings around how would you transform the mall or those kinds of things. And so that was a really fun exercise, people getting to be planners for the day. And so through all that process, we gather input from the community, from the citizens at large. And thankfully, you guys had great turnouts from your elected and appointed officials as well during that process, but they had their citizens hats on at that time for the most part. And all of that goes into the pot. And am I dead here? Hey, thanks. Sorry. It was just a prop. Okay, there we go. And so, but then also there are other things outside of the comprehensive plan process, and this is on the town webpage here, areas of primary focus for the town council. And there's a number of things with this really nice graphic that's there. And so we draw from those kinds of things as well as we go through the process. So the plan is organized pretty simply. We have the introductions. We have the reflections section. Reflections is sort of looking at the town as it is and looking back, trying to understand, looking at this is sort of the data part of the plan. And then we move from there into the principles, and these are principles that we worked with the community to craft and make sure that they're very specific to what you guys had going on. Then there's a plan framework section, which is the part where we look at those comprehensively planned areas, the mall, Snowmass Center, and the rodeo grounds, and actually propose some specific ideas around that, so that people could have a real tangible discussion instead of just saying, like, okay, one person says, I want to have, this concept happening. Another person said, yeah, I like that concept too, but they both had something completely different in their mind. So we actually drew things in those areas to start to tease out people's thoughts and feelings about what those meant. And then there's the take action section, and those are the more specific directives to move these ideas forward from just vision to action. And then we have where we've documented the public process, because what happens is down the road, 5, 6, 7 years from now, somebody picks up this document and they say, oh, this is really cool. How'd they come up with that? Or I totally disagree with this. How'd they come up with that? And so we want to sort of capture all the effort that all of the community put into that. So we have the public process section as well. So going through the guiding principles, the vision statement, we set about to create a vision statement looking backwards. And what we realized is that through the input we received, that the old vision statement actually could carry forward from the 2010 comprehensive plan, and so we actually just used that. It was sort of well-rounded enough to really be able to continue on. Key points are wanting to be the leading multi-season, family-oriented, inclusive resort community. There's ideas about natural splendor and how do we protect and preserve that. Looking to be stewards of the environment, the economy, and society. It's really nice and overarching statement. And so that kind of forms the foundation of all the things that came after that. We have these guiding principles that kind of are sort of starting to distill that vision statement. And these are the things that everybody is saying, we hold these things to be part of who we are and what we want to see moving forward in our plan. So for stewardship, we talk about the village will be operating in a manner that conserves and safeguards the land. It's kind of like the stuff that's in the vision statement, the views, the vistas, the watershed and resources, and become a model of environmental stewardship so that people from around the country actually look to you guys to see how do they do it here. We talked about being vibrant, having the village operating in a manner that conserves and safeguards. So that's the duplicate, wonderful. So the point of that was supposed to be that having the community be a vibrant place, so that it was economically vibrant and socially vibrant. I have the wrong words in here. I think it's correct in the document. But vibrant is something that we heard a lot about. You guys have a lot going on here. We want to continue to enhance that as we move forward. They want to be genuine. We heard people want to be, have this be a real place. So retaining the natural, pristine, unique, small village character. So character and small town feel was something that came up over and over, creating places that are interesting and welcoming, well-designed, useful, providing long-standing value to the community. That was important. Active and healthy. We know that you guys, and it's so interesting as an outsider, standing here listening to you all come in and talk about what you've been doing today. And I just think like, wow, how do you guys ever stay indoors? You have so many options of things you can do to be active and healthy. So we want to promote and expand on what you've already got in that regard. So that's what that guiding principle is about. We want to be balanced, providing a high quality of life for residents and a fulfilling experience for visitors. And that was one of the things that came up a lot is, are we a resort community or a community with a resort? And that kind of went back and forth. And so we figured that balance was actually a good way to think about that. And so having a good mix of both of those things, something for everyone, because we know that how important the visitors are to this place. We want to be connected, so we looking at having a safe and reliable, innovative transportation system. You guys, for a place of this size, your transportation system is remarkable. So we want to continue to build on that and make sure that there's also ways to get around on foot as a pedestrian. But we also know that people are going to drive here, so we want to provide sufficient infrastructure for cars as well. In all weather conditions, and making sure we have good linkages between the different nodes that are set out right now in the community. And we want to be inclusive, looking at broadening the demographic composition of the visitors and residents. It's a very interesting place that you have here. People come from all over the world, and so you get to have a sense of all different types of people. But we also have people who come here to visit, people who live here, people who have second homes here, and people who work here. And so making sure that we're being inclusive to meet all of those different types of people's needs as well is what this starts to pick up on. The plan frameworks are probably the easiest thing to comment on when you see the plan. They're the most visual. They're the ones that I think certainly have thus far gotten the most commentary, and that's the point. That's how it normally is. So the way that we set this up is we have the conservation and development map, and so that you'll find in the document, and that's a key thing to look at. The different colors correspond to, we have privately owned recreation and open space areas, publicly owned recreation, protected open spaces, low density residential, village core, and community facilities and institutions. And then the comprehensively planned areas are called out with stars, and so you'll see how much of the land mass is called out for low density residential, and then you have, which is really nice, so much of the green, which is the open space or protected areas. So that's actually really remarkable. And you see how little of the land mass is shown up as the residential, and then the village core is really just this small area between the mall and the base village and Snowmass Center. And the idea was to figure out a way to really have those three things start to function more as one as you go through this planning process. So zooming in, you can start to see, so they're all shown in the red. Here's Town Hall, and then the numbered parking lots are here. But it's really, when you look at it at this view, it looks really sort of intense what's going on. But when you zoom out and you look at, and you find the actual boundary, it's pretty remarkable how much you guys have conserved. And there doesn't seem to be much desire to start infringing on those other areas, which is really nice. So we showed these images during the Planapalooza, so some of you have seen them before. If you weren't at that closing presentation and haven't looked at the document, you may not have seen that. So what you're about to see are images that show the current condition and then a potential future. These aren't intended to be development proposals. They're not intended to say, here's what ought to happen in this property. But what it does is it shows here's a manifestation of some of the feedback that we've heard from the community and what that could be like. And so then the idea is that then you can respond to that and say, yeah, this is exactly what I had in mind, because we heard some people say, oh, we'd really, where we do develop, it would be kind of cool to develop intensely and have it be more urban feeling. And other people have said, absolutely not. That's not at all what we have in mind. In fact, one of the areas that was called out for redevelopment in consideration was the mall. Some people said, we love the mall just as it is, and we wouldn't like to see anything different than is there. Now, on the other hand, we also met with the owner of the mall, and they said, yeah, that's great and all, but we need to make money, and so we need to make sure that we're doing a good job of making sure that the plan has in it something not only for the citizens, the residents, the visitors, but also the property owners, the developers, and people who are going to, in the end, build whatever the future looks like here. You're mostly built out, though, and so the real focus of the plan is about redevelopment of those areas, not intended to add a bunch of new residential subdivisions on the hills and hinterlands and all of that. So looking at Town Park, there was a long list of things that people talked about. At the beginning of the process, there was the talk about that'd be a really cool place for maybe an employee village. So it gets actually more intense down there. It's a good place for employee housing. Something different and unique for the entryway into Snowmass Village. But as we looked at it, and as we looked at the program and the other community desires for all of the recreational needs, and we looked at the poster plan, those sorts of things, we realized quickly that actually wasn't possible, without a complete change in direction. And so we focused more on the recreational side of things, and barely had a limited impact on the residential side. So what you'll see is here, sort of a elaborated rodeo grounds with some cool seating around it, parking areas, paddocks, additional ball fields, an expanded pond, transit drop-off. And what we wanted to do was have a little bit of a sense of arrival, a sense of place with some buildings, and maybe there's a visitor center, some of those kinds of things here. But as you come in, you're not just looking at parking lot and sort of dirt rodeo, which is sometimes mud. And so we're trying to emphasize that, make a nice park in front here, hide the parking in the rear between the existing facilities, looking at bike track here around, additional ball fields, skate park. And then here, the only residential we added was actually just continuing on the existing neighborhood pattern to a point at which made sense to stop it. And that was the only additional residential, even though we had initially conceived of and citizens had talked to us about making this more of a residential feel. The idea here, we were looking at doing a parking structure with actual event space on top, because we know there's a great need for parking. And it sounds like with further discussion and things that, maybe that kind of thing moves on the other side. But the idea is to get, those kind of ideas out here, not that it needs to be here exactly, but, some of these ideas, as you'll see in the plan, are just kind of called out as at bullet points. Here's some things to consider. We need some of this. We need some of that. Let's do these kinds of things. So here's a sort of the drone view before and how that might look as an after. You can imagine this being a really cool and active node here as people come in to the village and don't have such a view of the parking lots. Moving over to Snowmass Center, which is, as you all know, the place where sort of the daily life happens. And so figuring out how do we do something that really features and preserves the existing businesses and services that you guys use over there so much. And then sort of building off of that. So here's a potential area. There's the draw that kind of comes up here. We're looking at leaving the existing center in place, adding some development around here, potential stop for a gondola to come across, pedestrian bridge going across. Here's Town Hall. Just looking at redeveloping this area in some different ways. All the light pink buildings, by the way, are existing. And then the darker ones are potential proposed buildings. And then there's also this other draw that comes up here. So, and one of the things to note too, in particular when you're looking at plans like this, not only is this just, a potential, sort of visioning, but it also anticipates long term. Like this is not a 5-year proposal. I mean, we talk about planning as a 100-year endeavor, a 50-year endeavor. You guys, it probably wouldn't take you that long here because you're such a desirable place, but some places we do plans that's literally like you'll get lucky if you can achieve all the dark red buildings in 100 years. So here you can see, like maybe this would be a phase 1, maybe this is another phase coming in, and then there could be even another phase over there. Now, that said, there's also the thought, well, yeah, just because you can build in those little draws doesn't mean you have to. And so maybe it's not that ever. Maybe it's not that ever. Maybe it's just this, or maybe it's not this and it is that. And so that's the idea, is just to say, development over here, make this a node. You have people living here. It now starts to become more vital, more active, more of a even more of a real place on a day-to-day basis. So anyway, so that's kind of how that lays out, and you can start to see so keep your eye there before and after. So here's a pedestrian bridge coming across, which would be nice. Here's a potential, kind of landing spot for a gondola. And then kind of working with the terrain and the topography, doing some cool stuff there. And some of these, we actually pulled out old plans that people have been looking at and tried to get some inspiration from those. And some of them we've just said, taking liberties. But anyway, just for the point of visualization there. And here, this is a view looking, here's, Clark's, there's a view looking down here. And so how this could actually transform into sort of a main street. So here's still Clark's here. And so you have this really neat little sort of low scale, low key main street. And you can imagine, this guy actually lives right off the screen here, and maybe somebody lives up there. So it'd be quite a different experience in just the current parking lot area. So here's the mall here, the numbered lots here. And now this one is actually interesting because we drew this and we actually showed all the existing buildings. And so it looks like we did something major here. But in fact, I took Photoshop and clipped all this out that we drew and said, what is it? It actually looks pretty, you're kind of like, what did you do if you don't see all of this? Because it really looks like just the mall. And so the idea here is just showing the mall redeveloping, the mall maybe becoming a little bit higher. We've talked about how high is too high and those sorts of things. But we know that just redeveloping it in its current two-story configuration doesn't really work financially. And so they'll need to, get a little bit more intensity there at the mall in order to do that. We showed another building here, sort of blocking the view from the numbered lots. We showed this was a numbered lot here, and so looking at development happening here, having parking underneath, having the transit center come through here, and then all of this kind of works together. We had a more aggressive iteration where you actually could redevelop all of these numbered lots, and for now we're just showing this little bit, and then having another phase here with a large parking structure, and so that can help deal with some of the parking problems. But anyway, the idea is really just to modernize this, have a little bit more density there so that it's financially viable to redevelop it, and wanting to feature things like the Benedict Trail and all of these kind of things as well. So, and here's the view looking in. This would have been this. This is looking right in here like this. So this was a numbered lot at one point. And so this is new, and this is looking down towards the slopes. So this would be, you see maybe another story on top of what's there, a couple of extra stories at this point. But most importantly, kind of creating this grand civic space. Because right now, when you go, at least as an outsider, the mall feels really disconnected, because the road's kind of out here, and then you actually are over across in the parking lot, and it's sort of, you got to go up steps to get into it. And so the idea is to sort of to bring this out and really make it even more visible and key to the presence of this place, and enhance this node as a real part of the community. So take action, and a lot of this stuff is some of what you'll see around here. Getting back to the guiding principles, featuring and protecting all things green and healthy, looking at making Snowmass Village more walkable, bikeable, hikeable, promoting the town resiliency and sustainability plan, protecting public views, protecting wildlife and habitat, supporting comprehensive water conservation program, being innovative with waste management, and protecting open spaces that are important to the community. These are all crucial things from what we've heard. We want to, looking at promoting the mixed-use activity centers and diversifying the economy. We're looking at ensuring that a broad range of housing alternatives are available for employees, employers, and residents, promoting higher density mixed-use development in order to create a vibrant live, work, play activity center in targeted development areas, and target is key there. Creating a quality work environment. We want to encourage a full-service array of retail and service opportunities, fostering the creation and growth of small businesses. We want to benchmark the town's economic development success on a periodic basis, and so kind of taking stock of how we're doing from time to time, and finding ways to attract the creative industries and creative people. We've heard that there's a lot of talent in the region in that regard, and how do we bring them here and get them here is really cool. We want to expand housing choice and affordability. So we want to focus on new housing within the nodes. We want to provide more employee housing, and looking at incentives for accessory dwelling units. We know that you guys already currently allow them, and so how do we get people to utilize that more often, because that's a great way to create some of that more affordable housing. We want to promote micro housing and bring aging care facility or senior housing, because we learned that so many people, as they age in the community, will literally have to leave, unless they can afford to, have care at their house or those sorts of things. There's not a facility in place for them. And we see this in cities and towns that work in all over the country. So that's something we heard a good bit about as well. Another one of the things was preserving and celebrating the unique character and arts and culture here. So we want to develop Snowmass arts and culture even beyond what you already have. You've got a great start in place. We met tons of people who are already doing this kind of thing. So we really want to just build on what they're doing. We want to embrace a creative economy, looking at integrating civic art into your public spaces so that it becomes a feature. You guys are already doing a good job with the loops out here and other things that you've got going on. We want to create flex space and live work units, so maybe artists can live right where they work. Improving experiences in the Base Village Transit Center. We heard a lot about that. Like, yeah, it's nice that we have that, but it's the experience in there is pretty cavernous and not all that inviting. And then people talked a lot about updating the older buildings in the commercial core. Now, one of the things that is difficult is, again, that sort of financial viability and making it where they can afford to do it. But the other thing is, we heard a lot about how do we modernize even buildings that aren't commercial, but all of them mostly are in condominium associations, which is really difficult to get everybody on board to kind of say, like, let's update this and move from the 60s into the 2018. So you may just have to really start featuring the nostalgic kind of 60s ski village as your thing, and so that's kind of cool. Get all the ski patrol people in retro ski gear and all that. So promoting transportation choice and mobility. Again, you guys are doing a great job, but the plan talks about specifically prioritizing walking and safety improvements. The topography makes it tricky enough to walk out here for flatlanders like me, but we want to make sure that there's adequate facilities for people to do that. But we know that there's been a lot of discussion in the past about, do we want sidewalks? Does that change the character of this place? And so that kind of goes into this. Implementing an e-bike share system, so that can help with people biking around with the terrain with the e-bikes. Bring car sharing and transportation network companies to Snowmass. There's enough people here who don't want to have a car here all the time, even the visitors, but they want to be able to get around sometime and maybe visit your neighbors and things like that. So we want to bring those in. Connecting Base Village to the mall so they can start to function better and more symbiotically, which I would really start to mean making sure that Skittles or some other system functions even better. And then connecting Base Village to Snowmass Center, and that comes into the play with the pedestrian bridges and gondolas and things like that. Promoting and encouraging a culture of bicycling. You guys have obviously a great start with that, but what can we do to even enhance that and feature that even more? We want to spread the daily travel peaks so that the traffic isn't quite so difficult at certain times of day and times of year. And we want to manage parking and transit, focus on taking it to the next level, and evaluate and monitor the progress we're making in all of these things. So that becomes important. I told you guys this was the boring part where I read to you, so I apologize, but it has to be done. Now you can't say, like, I never heard this stuff, even if you don't read the document. So, Town Park. Well, first bringing the poster plan was great, and so really when it comes to that sort of the Parks and Rec and those sorts of things, the comprehensive plan is really just defers to the poster plan. But some of the key components of that, the Town Park recreation and trails projects, continue them that are recommended in the poster plan. We have open space policies and actions that are in there. There are garden policies in action, trails policies, recreational program recommendations, and it is robust. I mean, there are a million recommendations in there. It's wonderful. Administrative and management policies and actions are in there, and then the master plan standards for how to go about doing this are all there. So what you'll do is when you want to know more about that, you just pick up the poster plan as the companion to the comp plan rather than putting it all in there and making the document much, much bigger. We want to provide reliable services and municipal transparency, develop a public realm plan for the village that organizes future infrastructure investments, and really that's just more like capital improvements and things, and how do we go about that in the future. You guys are doing that, but building on that. Build more community infrastructure in the public realm. We want to think about our buildings and fields as multi-purpose facilities, so that rather than having to build additional things, we can say, well, we have this building already and it's not fully utilized. What else can we do in that building to provide essentially more square footage without building any more square footage? So it's a great concept to keep the scale of building low here. We want to find locations for a permanent library. We heard about that. We want to coordinate with staff and regional service providers to provide infrastructure as needed to serve the conservation and development map. We want to monitor water storage capacity in the village and coordinate with SWSD officials if improvements are needed. And so we heard a lot about as we develop and move in the future, how do we make sure we're not exceeding our infrastructure capacity? And so that's really what that's speaking to. We want want to provide reliable services. We talked about that. Looking at local, this continuation because that was a long one. Implementing a local stormwater management strategy, expanding child care facilities. We heard so much about that, the Little Red School is bursting at the seams, and how do we, provide all the child care that people need and education. We want to begin the process of developing a historic preservation program. You don't have many buildings left, but those that you do have, we want to make sure we keep them. We want to change the town's trash behavior to divert more waste. And then we want to continue supporting the efforts to expand and modernize the airport. Wonderful airport. I used it today, this morning, and it's really great, but how can we help in the process of expanding and modernizing? So that's kind of the big picture ideas, but all of these things have much more detail, and it goes through them, and so you really need to read the plan. This is really just a teaser, so to get you to sit down and want to read the plan. So what do we have going on next? The next steps are the public review process. So we're looking at like March 1st. You have until March 1st to provide comments on the draft that's out. You can go to the webpage, plansnowmass.com. You can provide comments online at any time, and you'll also be able to find the documents there. Then there's the adoption process, so planning commission hearings, they'll make a recommendation, and then that'll go to the town council for the final adoption. And those are kind of the big next steps. So that's it. So I just wanted to go really quickly through all that and see if we've sparked any comments, any thoughts, any big ideas, anything that was missed. And mind you, if I didn't say it, it doesn't mean it's not in there. So yes.
Two, please.
Yeah.
Can you, I'm sorry,
Sure, I'm John Hornblower. I'm fighting bronchitis. Sorry. I'm not contagious, I promise. The first question is with the rodeo. Making it green space sounds great, but where's the livestock going to go? Where are the horses going to run and train and warm up and warm down? I didn't see any provision for that.
Yeah.
The second question is with regard to the mall. The existing business owners and real estate owners can't make money the way that it is. I'll take that. It needs to be a little bigger. The photo you showed me was 5 stories tall. Does it really need to be that big?
No, not necessarily, for sure. So the idea is that, well, let's go to the rodeo first. So first and foremost, what we drew there was definitely not intended to be like super, super specific. I mean, there were a few things where they said, oh yeah, we want to have, what's it called, a pump track? Is that the bike thing? So we like, oh yeah, so we put the pump track in, so we could point to that and say that's there. But we put some little corrals or whatever to go along with the rodeo. But when it comes to the other things, like the more specific things like you're talking about, I would say that comes in part of the poster as part of a future planning effort. It's just intended to say, formalize the rodeo, make it a cool feature. That's that. When it comes to the rendering of the mall or any of the other ones for that matter, it's really a matter of. So now the question to you is 5 stories too tall?
Yes.
So you say, so there we go. So that's the point of the drawing. So I think, and I can't remember if we said specifically in the plan, like between, I think maybe there was discussion, I know during Planapalooza of like 3 to 5 stories, but mostly 3. It was kind of the thought. And then also not just anywhere you want to, but making sure that you're very careful and conscientious about the views. So looking at view studies and stuff. So like there may be some areas where 5 stories will be fine because it's not blocking anything or it doesn't have any impact. But in other cases, maybe it would be, sort of detrimental to the overall character. So I saw another hand pop up. Yes.
I'm Debbie Shore. Forgive me for being late, and I came in just as you were saying the plan for, it looks like, for the center might not be built out right away, but as a longtime business owner, former business owner, we used to own a business on the mall, and we had great hopes when Base Village was built that we would be able to support 2 commercial areas. Now I know we've stalled out in all of this, but 3 commercial areas in this town, just, I cannot ever imagine it happening, no matter how much of all the rest of Base Village gets built and how busy we are. I think 3 commercial areas is cutting it into way too many pieces, and that really concerns me.
And the 3 that you're referring to would be the mall, Base Village, and the center?
Correct.
Right. Well, and I think I know what you're talking about, because in spite of everyone's, wishes and best intentions of, having a robust, thriving commercial, element around here, especially in times when, it's off season and they wish that there was another restaurant open or whatever the case may be, there clearly is a limited market, commercial market for, businesses to go in. And so, whatever happens has to be cognizant of that. I mean, truly, we do already have the 3. There is commercial in Base Village and in the mall and in the center. And so really it's a matter of building on what's there. And then the additional residential, part of it would be to meet some of the employee housing needs and shortage. Part of it could be the seniors. Part of it could be just additional density that would be beneficial to those businesses. And so I think that whatever happens has to be very carefully thought through. And that's the thing that's great about it. We met some of the developers through the process, and they're very much aware of, oh God, we don't want to plan or build anything that's not going to just thrive like gangbusters. And so in the end, it will kind of fall on their shoulders to make sure that it works. We just want to provide the overall framework and concept of these 3 places sort of functioning together. And in a lot of ways, the better they work together, the less it's like 3 distributed, the more it becomes like 1. And so they can really feed off of one from one another. Yes.
I'm Jay Shoemaker. Let's see, you mentioned that you initially brought in economists and transportation, a bunch of experts. Could you add a little, enlighten us a little bit about what they said about the projected population growth here? In a sense that adds perspective on the commercial vitality too.
Where's my document? Jillian, Clint, anybody remember the exact numbers?
1,000 more residents over the next 20 years.
Thank you.
1.5% a year.
1.5% a year.
We currently have 2,889 residents.
So that was the projection.
4,000.
But that's what we want, right?
Right. That's correct.
You know,
Yes.
when I was reading through the plan, which I've just scanned, I'm not prepared to comment on it really, but I wondered if there was a little more data about the required size of a market to support a grocery store or enlarged grocery store sort of thing, or drugstore, that sort of. I just wish I knew how many customers you needed for each sort of facility.
Yeah, no, well, I think, to your point, when you look at, what is the draw, sort of the catchment area for those types of businesses, I mean, in most places, they would say, you guys are really lucky to have Clark's here, like there's so few rooftops overall. But, as you look at the larger region and the visitors and all that, and your sort of population size as it increases, it fluctuates. I think that I can't imagine that we're going to, see any big, additional large grocery stores or those kind of things come in. I think it's more, kind of in keeping with the types of things that you already have here now. But, I wish that our economists were here. He'd rattle off 1,000 things for you.
Also, one last point. I think it could be mentioned in any master plan that how lucky this community is that the decision makers are basically not professional politicians. Where I come from, when politicians have to win the election to put food on the table, planning is out the window.
Yeah. Where do you come from?
Never mind.
I was going to say, it sounds like some places we've worked. So, something?
Hi, I'm Bill Turner. Just back to the population estimate, the only one in here is that 1,000 over the next 20 years increase, which is, I mean, the population projection is very powerful on everything else. And I just wondered, 2 points there. Does that assume or include any and all affordable employee housing? And secondly, with all the expansion of Base Village and SKICO's projections, what's the equivalent for visitor population over the next 20 years?
Yeah.
Because they will be customers of these businesses.
Right. I think it does include that, the employee housing and things. As far as the projections with the ski company and all of that, I'm not sure how the additional visitors come into play, except for that to support them, you'll need more employees, which means you need more employee housing, which, you know, so it kind of is this ripple effect. It's an interesting thing. You, based on your old goals of was it 60% housing provided for employees, you already have a deficit. And so before we can even start counting new employee housing towards additional employees that will come in the future, we have to deal with the deficit, or decide that it's actually, you know, not a goal that's possible, you know. And so that's, you know, we've kind of assumed and carried forward the old concepts that everybody, you know, wants to continue that on. We see on, you know, town council's webpage, that's the first thing that pops up as one of their priority items. So we've moved that forward, but it, you know, we have to figure out how to deal with all of that. And, you know, to your point about, you know, does it have to grow to 1,000 over 20 years? If we don't want it to, you know, we just need to decide sort of what is the growth limit or the cap, if you will. We have, you know, the plan has this whole concept that we brought forward and modified of just big enough. And so in a lot of ways, the projections, and to your question about do we have to do 5 stories, really, in a lot of places, not even places that are doing so well as you are, but just places that care about their character. They say, you know what, like, we know the demographic trends and population projections say this, but we don't want to go to 5, 6, 8 stories, even if there will be a market for that. So that becomes a limiting factor. You just simply say that's not what we want. And then the zoning, the ordinances are actually the things that determine that, right? They say you can only build this high. And so that starts to become a limiting factor. But once we've done that, we've now said this is all of the growth that we're going to have. And now then, you know, prices start going up and all of that. So there's consequences and repercussions for all of those things, just like any city who puts a growth boundary around themselves. So it's all intertwined and very complicated and nuanced, but really exciting to think about now. How do we answer these questions? Yeah.
Hi,
Oh,
it's me
sorry.
again.
He's got the mic.
One second.
The talking stick.
Earlier this spring at the lower part down in the Snowmass Club. And some of my observations, with not having been too much of a participant in the prior part of this plan, are that there seems to be about, I was a former school board member of the Aspen School District, so about 20% of the population of the school is from Snowmass Village. I didn't see anything on a highlight basis talking about education planning, so I was just to hear your comments around that. The second piece is I'm a creative, if you will.
I saw you nodding to that.
I acknowledge myself that way, and I think forward thinking, and whether it's transportation or the way all of us as economic animals are being incented to buy things, not necessarily always locally because of pricing or convenience or whatever. Is there anything in the plan that, and if you go to the post office from 1976 or 80 when I used to live here to today, it's just seems to me like I want to make sure we're thinking forward even for the population that is here around technological changes in the way we buy, live, et cetera. So
Yeah.
some thoughts for those on those two.
Yeah, that's good. And we didn't hear much about the education side of things, except for the younger kids. It seems like everybody's pretty content with kind of the schooling that's happening here, but we have to figure out how to deal with the really little kids. And
The reason I ask
Yeah.
is I believe the school district believes that there is a parcel reserved in concept up here for some
Yeah.
kind of a future. And I just was wondering when this plan had that somewhere demarcated.
yeah,
So I'll put it as a comment.
yes, thank you. No, great. Who has the talking stick next?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to be a pest. The new Limelight building and the new Viceroy edition will carry at full capacity, what, 500 people, maybe more? That's 1.5% of 2,800. So I would just question how you got to that number. I suspect that number is low, 1.5% per year, and I'm concerned about overcrowding over time. That just big enough is going to become too big too quickly.
Okay, great. And just so you guys know too, kind of the what I'm doing here is, especially in the ones where I give you like woefully lacking responses, they're going like, so we say to the economist, I go back and say, hey, here's this question, what's the appropriate response to that? So.
I'll be sure. Back to the issue of the current population. It was my belief and understanding that during the vote for Base Village, that a number of people who own property here switched their voter registration. One person in the couple generally switched their voter registration to Snowmass Village, which didn't really change our population, but it made our population look like it changed. And so I'm wondering about, have we adjusted for that, or has that number dropped down? Have people removed their voter registration from?
On that one, that answer is the census, we've got very active with the census, so I think our census numbers are far more active than they used to be. I think people prior to 04 were not active in the census, and we didn't have a really great number. Since then, we have, and our number's far more reliable. So yes, is the short answer. What I might do, Brian, for you, we got Julianne, Travis, me, we have a number of folks, the mayor, I know I saw Alyssa walking, some council members, some planning commissioners. If it's all right with everybody, we'd like to break this up and so everybody can have time to answer the individual questions. We're all around. There's comment cards up here. There's opportunities to comment up here. Everybody that's elected and appointed wants to hear this. We very much appreciate. I'll let Brian wrap it up, but so that we can get everybody's chance to talk about their individual issues, the school district, whatever those might be. We've got a lot of answers, and we can hopefully will be a lot more questions, and we hopefully can get a lot of these things answered for you.
Yeah, this is the thing that's great about this is we're to the point in the project now where staff actually knows more about it than the consultant does, at least me. Again, my economist could answer your question impeccably, but it's great. So we're, a lot of times we have projects where staff never really kind of like picks it up and runs with it, and so it's really wonderful that Clint can even make that offer, that they can all answer questions, and probably in a lot of the specific questions even better than I can. But as you kind of walk around and take a look at the things on the walls, truly just grab pens and mark it up. Just go crazy. I mean, the more information we have there, the better, because this is this isn't really like here's the plan, it's done. This is like here's the plan. Now tell us what you think about the plan, so we can we heard your thoughts before we wrote it. Now do we understand what you were saying to us, and is the plan reflective of what you were looking for as a community? And so that's going to be really important as you go through. Yeah.
Brian, I had a question regarding the rational nexus between economic side of any development. For example, Town Park, that's all owned by the town. And when I hear about a parking lot and really everything else, and you get an economist, do we have any projection of potential
No, no. We didn't get into that level of detail. It was much higher level than that. And so, I mean, really, that'd be a next level study. And also, too, and then the reason being is, you know, there are people who are involved in that area that have a much more specific, you know, better idea of what it ought to be, what it needs to be. Because again, when you look at the poster plan and something, there's like, we tried desperately to get as many of the things as were on the list of the wish list for that area as we could in that small area. But in the end, you guys are going to, as a community, going to have to make choices and say, like, here's what we do and don't want to do, and this is a priority. And then all that stuff would then get priced out. And price probably becomes a part of that, but we didn't get into that level of detail. All right. So with that, we'll all be around, standing around the room here. And yep. Yes. That's great. Yeah.